Neutral is a place of no movement. It means you're not making progress towards the goals or the ideas that are really important to you. Welcome to Beyond Neutral, where we talk about what gets you stuck and how we can shift and navigate the road forward. As leaders, as professionals in our careers, or just balancing and creating the kind of life you desire. I'm your host, Paula Reed. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to today's episode of Beyond Neutral. So I hope you caught my last episode. I talked about humility and how important humility is in really fostering effective relationships. How much being humble allows us to connect with people on a much deeper level. One of the hallmarks of humility is being able to admit you're wrong. And one of the things that we often have to know how to do when we are admitting we're wrong is understanding how to apologize. But these two things, boy, can they just trip us up in relationships. They're both incredibly difficult things to do. And it's certainly something that I've struggled with at different points in my life. And I've absolutely been in relationships with people who have no capacity to do that. And frankly, it erodes your relationship. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about that, about what it means to be wrong and what it means to apologize. These are two, I would call them art forms, okay? They're two skills that when done incredibly well can be so positively impactful on how you think of yourself and how you show up in relationships with others. So let's start about being wrong. I mean, in a corporate setting, in an organization, often we feel like, and actually, now that I'm saying that, I think even in personal relationships, right? Any kind of relationship, we feel that admitting that we are being wrong is showing weakness. And actually, there's plenty of evidence to support the fact that it's actually just the opposite. Being wrong, admitting you are wrong shows strength. It shows strength of character. It shows strength of ego. It shows self-confidence. It shows humility, which was the topic of my last podcast and how important that is. And it builds trust. Being able to admit you are wrong builds trust in a relationship. Because I don't know if you have ever been, although I suspect you have, been in a situation where, somebody took a position or took an action and they were absolutely wrong. And you knew they were wrong. They knew they were wrong. But they had to kind of skate over it. They had to gloss over it. They didn't have, I guess, the personal fortitude to be able to say, oh, wow, I was wrong. And believe me, that's a tough thing to say. In my family, being able to say you were wrong, oh my gosh, we would die on our sword before we would admit we were wrong about something. Gotten better about that, by the way. But it's tough, right? Because you feel vulnerable and you feel like you're in a competitive setting, and to admit you were wrong makes you fallible, right? And that's not necessarily something that's rewarded in organizations or in society, right? But the reality is we're all wrong. Everybody's wrong. And if you never thought you were, guess what? You are. You're wrong now because we all make mistakes. So what stops us from just admitting we're wrong? It's ego, right? It's ego. It's 100% fear of being vulnerable, fear of being called out. But the truth is, in any relationship that you have, if you can demonstrate your ability to be wrong, your ability to kind of put that on the line, what you're really doing is opening that up as an option for other people that you relate to. By admitting you were wrong to one person, okay, in one relationship, what you're telling them is, I think that's okay. I think it's okay to admit that I made a mistake. And in turn, you are creating safety in your relationship that they can then lean into and admit the same thing. But it's tough. Not everybody can do it. But we're only here to talk about you and what you can do, okay? So being able to just step up and say, hey, I was wrong about that. Here's the deal. And go forward with it is imperative for a good relationship, okay? The other thing that really matters with that, though, is an apology. You don't always need to apologize when you're wrong. You do need to apologize when you've done something that has impacted somebody else in a negative way. Sometimes we can just be wrong and say, hey, I was wrong about that. I checked that information and you were right. You can say, I'm sorry, I made that mistake, whatever. Sometimes that's appropriate. Sometimes it's not necessary. But there are many times in our lives, in our relationships, once again, be that your personal relationships or be that your professional relationships, where being able to effectively apologize is imperative to the long-term health and well-being of that relationship. I would flip that and say, not being able to apologize effectively erodes trust in relationships. So how do you do that? How do you apologize? What matters? What do you have to have in it? The number one thing is you have to have an immediate declaration of accountability. And in order to have an immediate declaration of accountability, there can be no words that make that somebody else's perception. So I don't know about you, but I've been in situations where a person has said something incredibly inappropriate or offensive. And rather than saying, I'm sorry I said that, and I'm sorry I made you uncomfortable, you get the if word in there. I'm sorry if what I said made you uncomfortable. Well, that's not an apology, because when you say if it made you uncomfortable, you're opening the possibility that it really wasn't that bad, right? That it really might not have really been what you thought it was. And by virtue of putting that little 2-letter word in there, you just lost credibility. You just lost accountability for the action that you took. Not okay. It's simple. I'm sorry. What I did created that for you. Period. No if, nothing else. And the next thing is, there's no but. Okay. I'm sorry. What I did created that for you. Period. If you add into that apology a but I was under a lot of stress, what you're basically saying is, I'm sorry I did that. I can't guarantee I wouldn't do it again under the same circumstances, right? Because if you're adding in a but, you're qualifying or justifying that there were circumstances that supported that decision in that moment. And then you're not apologizing. That means you're not apologizing. And the reason that we put an if in and a but in is to give ourselves wiggle room. It's to, in our own minds, to kind of justify what we've done, to justify the action that we've taken. And you know what? If you're justifying it or you're minimizing the impact it might have had of somebody, you're not apologizing. It's not possible. You can't do both. An apology is an accountability for an action, period. So no ifs and no buts. The next part about apologizing is including in it some type of retribution, such as, I'm so sorry I did that. I'd like to make it up to you. Is there something I can do to make it up to you? Or how can I make it up to you? Or here's what I'd like to do to make it up to you. Or here's what I'd like to do to show you that it's not going to happen again. Those are fantastic, depending on the level of what you're apologizing for. How bad is what you did? Okay. The other thing is that if whatever it is that you're apologizing for is such that it actually has eroded the quality of your relationship and has the potential to kind of be hanging out there between you, the other thing that can be incredibly beneficial is to be able to ask whoever you're apologizing to join in making this, finding a way forward. So I'm really sorry. I should not have done that. How do we make this better? What do I need to do to make this better? And how can we go forward? That's the joining. It's not them joining you in your apology. It's them joining you in the solution of what they need from you in order to move forward and put this behind you. There's an important distinction there that whoever you're apologizing to gets to choose whether they want to participate in that or when they want to participate in that. So, the art of the apology, 4 key factors. 1, full accountability. 2, no ifs or buts. 3, an understanding of not doing it again and an affirmation about how you're going to ensure you don't make that mistake again. And 4, an understanding of how the relationships moves forward from this point if the whatever you did was such that that needs to be clarified. That is the art of an apology. Anything short of that, and you're letting yourself off the hook. So be honest with yourself. If you're really going to apologize to somebody, own it. Step into it. There is nothing better for building trust in a relationship than recognizing your own accountability and taking full responsibility for it, and then establishing a way that you can move forward and continue your relationship in a new and better place. And I say it's a new and better place because by virtue of showing your willingness to be vulnerable, to be accountable, and to be humble enough to recognize how your behavior has impacted somebody, you have reestablished the foundation for potentially even a stronger relationship, whatever that may look like. So, the art of apologizing. If you feel uncomfortable having to apologize to somebody, sit back and ask yourself why. Because the discomfort is coming from your own exposure and your own ego and your inability to realize you made a mistake. And that discomfort, you have to sit through. And if you are willing to sit through it and go through an effective apology, you will find out that you feel better and stronger and more confident as a result of that. Trust me on that. There's nothing that can make you feel more confident than admitting you were wrong, apologizing, and getting to the other side of it with the realization that you're still whole as a result. Tip of the day, we can get stuck so often in relationships when we've impacted somebody and not taken the time out to recognize that. And what happens when we don't do that is we pile on, right? You don't forget it. You don't forget that somebody didn't really take responsibility for something. You don't forget that they weren't accountable. You do forget once they've apologized and taken responsibility for it, then it's so easy to wipe the slate clean. Short of that, it's very difficult to let go of things if there has not been any recognition and accountability and responsibility from the other person. So keep that in mind. If you want to move forward, if you want to continue to build a relationship, learn how to apologize. Highly beneficial skill. And actually, doing it well is in fact an art form. All right. That's it for my thought for the day. I hope you're having a great day and keep driving. If there's anything I can help with in terms of understanding how to manage through these very challenging emotional processes, such as admitting you were wrong and apologizing for it, I'm always happy to do it. Take care and keep driving. Thanks so much for joining us on this week's episode of Beyond Neutral. Make sure to visit our website, www.reidandco.com, for this week's show notes. That's reidnco.com. And if you found value in today's episode, I would really appreciate you giving us a rating on Apple Podcasts, or better yet, share it with a friend. Also, don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. All of this helps to support the show. Thanks so much. Take care.